Hello and welcome into my latest live video. It is Monday, the 12th of September, 2022. I'm Kerry Holzman, a career computer technician working for businesses, corporations, and consumers for over 30 years. And I'm here to just share with you my experience in diagnosing, repairing, and building computers. So the videos that I make are in no way intended to suggest that there is only one way to do something. It's also not intended to turn anybody into a technician, but rather to just give you enough information to determine if it's something that you can resolve on your own, or whether or not you should take your machine to an expert or a professional. So I show a lot of very common upgrades and builds that have the most universal appeal. I try to stray away from very specific niche topics. Once in a while we might touch on them, but overall it's intended to just be a general overview with enough information for people to be able to help themselves should they choose to do so, or at least to know what to expect if they want to take on a project of building, upgrading, or repairing their own computer. So that's what the goal has been all along. Sometimes we get viewers who think I'm telling them what to do. Sometimes I get viewers who disagree with my methods, but that's okay. When they make their videos, I would like to have the same opportunity to criticize their endeavors. But be that as it may, you can't please everybody. And I'm so glad you're here to join me, because we have limited the chat to members and moderators only. And this has been required because of the aforementioned harassment that is part of being a YouTube content creator or being on social media. So I know that all of you joining me in the chat are my friends. I consider you all my friends, and it makes presenting to you much more pleasurable. You can imagine being a teacher in high school where you've got students who don't want to be there, versus being a teacher in college where the students are paying to be there. I'll take being a teacher at college any day, knowing my students are there to learn. So I consider all of you not only my friends, but also students. And of course, the teacher learns from the students as well, and I appreciate feedback and other considerations when I present solutions or diagnostic techniques. You guys have been very, very helpful to me in the past, and we'd like to keep that going. Now, what I've got here is Threadripper's Revenge, and I'll tell you what's going on here. First of all, this is a new camera. I'm not quite sure. I've been messing with the settings a little bit. It might be a little washed out. And then over on camera 2, I've got the Panasonic camera, which I have adjusted. Here we are. So that's now the Panasonic camera. That looked a little washed out from before. I think the colors look much better on it now. You'll have to let me know if you prefer the Panasonic versus this other new camera. I will say I might have done myself a disservice on the new camera. I should just leave everything on auto except for the white balance, and that should be the baseline. But I'm just kind of curious how this camera will compare. And of course, everybody's got different opinions on what looks good. But of course, I go with the consensus. So overall, what the feedback is, overall, is what I'm interested in. So I appreciate the feedback on that. We should have good audio as well. Terrell says the Panasonic looked more in focus. So this camera has a feature on it, which is pretty handy with regards to focus. The problem is that it's so good at focusing on individual things that trying to get everything in the frame in focus, a little bit more of a challenge with this camera, because it's, in one way it's better for what I'm doing, and in another way it's not. For example, if I want to bring a product up to the camera and show it to you, I don't have to put my hand behind it anymore. Let me give you an example, because this is pretty cool. So this is the Seagate FireCuda 530, and when I hold that, you'll see the camera instantly snaps to that. I don't have to do the whole fidgeting with my hand thing, you know, that I used to do. Oh, my hair's all messed up. Anyway, this is going to go in here, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that. So there's a little more fine tuning, I'm sure, that I need to do with this camera. And I did notice that it tends to focus on something, and when it focuses on that something, everything else is a little out of focus, versus the other cameras I was using sort of focus the whole general area. But then when I bring something up to the camera, I can fidget a little bit with moving my hands around to try and force a focus on a product up close. So there's a give and a take here. And as I'm getting to know the internals of the cameras better, their menuing systems, they're all different. One's, you know, Sony, one's Panasonic, one's Canon, and how they go about their options and how effective their options are is very, very different from one manufacturer to another. So anyway, so we're going to run with this today and get an idea of where we're at with it. I will be going on vacation next week, so I'm trying to wrap up a bunch of work, and I will make some videos, a few. Well, I am in Michigan on my annual vacation. I've been very, very busy this year. I've had a lot of stress put on me this year, both from my business, from the YouTube side of things, from the Amazon side of things, and from Studio B. The whole studio side of things has created some additional workload for me that I'm still dealing with right now, and I'm hoping that I will have all of it wrapped up before I leave, because when I go on vacation, I just want to not have that stuff rattling around in my head, planning on what I'm going to have to do when I get back. So I want everything wrapped up. We'll see how well that goes. For those of you who haven't been part of the channel for very long, you may not have been there when I did this build. This is a Threadripper 3960X. It's a 24-core, 48-thread processor. And if you've been with the channel a long time, you know I struggled a lot with the original Threadripper build. It wasn't stable or reliable for about 2 years after I built it. And it was just one of the most nightmarish systems I'd ever built. Very finicky, very diva-like. And of course, you know, these systems are like Ferraris. Nobody's buying Ferraris for their reliability. And of course, it was a first generation Threadripper chip, which in and of itself, anything that's introduced brand new and there's no prior model, it's a learning curve and a maturity that goes on and a polishing that happens as they improve generation after generation. So we're essentially on the third generation, depending on how you're counting the generations of Threadripper. And you know, the high-end Thripper now, that's 64 cores, 128 threads, and it sells for a little over $8,000 just for the CPU. So this is a bargain, comparatively speaking. We've got a $550 motherboard in here, and when I built the original Threadripper, we were limited with regards to cooling choices. So over the years that have passed, cooling choices have become far more varied than they once were. And all the struggles right out of the gate that I had with the original Threadripper build didn't have any of those problems with this build. Now, the original Threadripper build, which was a community-supported project, is still over at Studio A. In fact, when I was streaming from Studio A a couple weeks ago, that is the streaming computer. But it's not impressive. That Threadripper, now that it's been running and it's been solid and stable like it should have been right out of the gate, it's not really all that fast compared to a modern-day consumer-based processor. What do you expect? It's a few years old, but at that level, it shouldn't go that obsolete that quickly. But it works, and it's fast, but it's nothing compared to a modern 12th gen or Ryzen 7, Ryzen 9 processor. But it was done for the channel, for the learning experience, so we could go through it together. A lot of what you see online is paid advertising, especially on the bigger YouTube channels of tech. They're just making commercials. For the most part, they're just sent products for free, or sometimes even paid to make a video that has to then be approved by the manufacturer. And what you're seeing may not be 100% honest. It may be that it's honest but not fully disclosing all the information. There may be things the content creator is restricted in being able to say or how they say it. So as long as we're community funded here, then I can continue to buy parts the same way you do and to experience things in the real world the way you should experience them. And I wish that was the normal thing that people did here on YouTube, was to show real experience and to share that, good or bad, with the audience, rather than all the editing and polishing that gets done that can very much change the appeal of a product. So, you know, if you see value in that, you've come to the right place, because I don't see too many other YouTube tech channels that are as thorough and as honest as I am, even to the point where it embarrasses myself. So, but that's just how it is. Not everything about me is perfect either. And I'm certainly not going to criticize a manufacturer or a design and then turn around and say that I'm flawless, right? So it's not a, is in my intention is to be as objective as possible, to consider the value of time and the value of money. Most of us, in my experience, going out there working in the real world, don't have an abundance of either time or money. Sometimes, if we have an abundance of time, then we have a shortage of money. Other times, if we have an abundance of money, we're so busy working, we don't have any time, you know, to go and enjoy the money, let's say, to take a vacation, for example. But a lot of videos are made as though people have all the time in the world and all the money in the world. And I have only met a handful of people in my entire existence on this planet that meet both those categories. So I don't know who those videos are for. So that's my motivation. That's what I'm trying to do here differently than what you might find on other YouTube channels. And since I had such a bad experience with Threadripper, and you guys were with me the whole time, you experienced it with me, never mind all of the praising and fanboyism that, you know, will criticize one manufacturer for a small little thing, but then overlook a major thing that's with the other manufacturer because they're a fan of the other manufacturer, so that's okay that they can do that. It's not a big deal. But when the company that you don't like does it, you make a mountain out of a molehill. That is typical internet nonsense. So I'm not going to undo that. I'm not going to change the behavior that you see online, but I am trying to hopefully make you aware that not everything you read or see online is honest or completely thorough. Sometimes there are omissions, whether they're blatant or unintentional. My goal by doing these videos live, unedited, uncut, one take, is that you get a real sense of the time involved. You get a real sense of what the process is in reality versus what the process is of making a video. So, you know, to each their own. Each type of video has a place. And that's what you can expect from this channel. The original Threadripper went so badly, I was hesitant to ever do another one. But I talked to a good friend who's also in the computer building business. His name is Anthony Remis, and he owns Remis Computer Solutions out in Henderson, Nevada, just outside of Las Vegas. And Anthony builds a lot of high-end Threadripper systems for CAD workstations and things of that nature, and as well as overclocks them and then puts a 3-year warranty on them. So what Anthony is doing is far more time-consuming and involved per build than what I do. So I probably sold in 1 week what Anthony sells in a month, just sheer number of machines shipped. But Anthony's probably making way more money than me. So since Anthony, I knew Anthony, first of all, I consider him to be a very good technician. I consider him to be a peer. And I went to Anthony for advice. And I said, look, you know what I went through on Threadripper. And to some extent, when we were having this conversation, was still kind of going through. Just kind of this never-ending, this build that would never end. It would never be There was always something going on. It was overheating, it was unstable, it was this, it was that. And of course there were BIOS updates, chipset updates, and slowly but surely it got better. So I said, I know you know this, Anthony, and you know how I am. Do you think I should give Threadripper another chance? And he said, yes. He said, I completely understand everything you're talking about in your experience with the original Threadripper. I experienced it too. I said, well, how come when you looked on the forums, when I looked on the forums, nobody's talking about that? It's like, oh, it's just me. And he's like, yeah, that's just the way the fanboys are, you know. He said, but you're not alone, and your frustrations are real. I was going through many of the same problems you had. He said, they've done a much, much better job now with this current edition of Threadripper, and I would strongly recommend that you build one, because I don't think that you got a fair first impression with Threadripper. You know, it was out of the gate, typical of any new introduced product, and the improvements are such and so significant that he says, I think if you build a modern one, you will have a very different experience. So I said, okay, what are the tricks I need to know? He goes, well, first of all, I would use ASUS motherboards and I would use G-Skill RAM on an AMD Threadripper build, and generally on any AMD build. And he went through the explanation for that, and I said, okay, fine. So what board do you know, I'm asking Anthony. I don't want to go through what I went through again, so I want to avoid RAM compatibility problems. I want to avoid motherboard issues. What do you recommend? So Anthony recommended the board we're using, and the RAM we're using, and the chip, which is a 3960X. I put a Seasonic 1300 watt prime modular power supply in here, and there's a 2090, is this a 2080 Ti, I think, in here? I can't remember what video card this has. And then we had a Samsung 970 EVO 2 terabyte drive. And it went together perfectly, just like any other build you see me do. It worked first time, and it's solid, and it's fast. This thing actually feels fast. The first Threadripper I've got, it never ever felt fast to me. This one feels proper fast. So I want to go over it with you because this will be the last time we're going to see it. This is being sold. A customer reached out to me, and they're local in Arizona, and said they wanted to have a machine that can do virtual machines, and they wanted it to be able to game, even though gaming is not really important to them. They would like to impress their son. And I said, you know, I have this build here, and I haven't been using it. This was over at Studio A just to get it out of the way, and so it collected a little bit of dust, and it needed some updates. And I went ahead and updated it and dusted it off. And I said, you know, I really should have put a Gen 4 solid state drive in here, and I would put a 3090 Ti. And the customer said, yeah, that's what I agree with you. Put the 3090 Ti in it, and the 4 terabyte FireCuda 530, which is pretty much, I think it's the fastest consumer-based NVMe drive, Gen 4 NVMe drive on the market. That's what I keep hearing. So what we can do today is we can clone the operating system we've got now, which is Windows 10 for Workstations, which is more ideal when you have this many cores and this much RAM, versus Windows 10 Pro. We can clone that OS over to the 4 terabyte and then uninstall the Samsung driver, the NVMe driver, and the Samsung Magician software, because we won't need it anymore. And then we can do a performance test on this. And then we can change the video card out. I have a brand new in the box right back here, 3090 Ti. This thing is huge, and it's all still sealed shut. I've never even cut the tape and looked inside of the box. And I thought, you know, maybe that's what we'll do today. We'll have a little bit of fun. So in the meantime, we can fire it up and show you how it looks. and how it reacts on screen. So let me get some cables plugged into the back of it. I'll also need to get a keyboard and a mouse. So let's see what we got going on here. We'll give it some power. Right down here, switch is in the off position. Plug it into the network, even though it does have this Wi-Fi antenna up here. And let's see, I need an HDMI plug. And we'll plug that into this graphics card. And I need that keyboard and mouse. Here we go. And Mira Aura became a member for 4 months. Hey, right on. Thank you, Mira Aura. Carrie, if you have a second during the live stream, can you put a link in chat or the video notes to the SATA to USB adapter you've used in previous videos? Actually, I use about 3 or 4 different ones. The reason is some of them have a thicker cable, they're not quite as flexible, or a shorter cable. And depending on what I'm plugging in, like a mechanical hard drive, it's pretty heavy, and if it's dangling, the weight of the hard drive it'll slip out and fall as you're reading and writing to it. So I need a longer cable to use with something like that. And again, if it's a desktop hard drive, you still have to provide power to it separately. So they have SATA adapters, SATA to USB adapters rather, that have the optional power if you want to do 3.5-inch drives. Or you can do like a hard drive toaster or dock. That makes it super easy. Or if it's something like you want to add a little storage, like a flash drive, you have some 2.5-inch solid state drives that are pulled out of an old build or something, and maybe they're 60, 120 gigs, so 250 gigs, and they're too small for you now. You can just plug the cable into it, plug it into USB, and make it a flash drive, and no enclosures necessary. If you look in the video notes, you will see everything I use is available at my Amazon store. I think that's what it says in the video notes. And if you click on my Amazon store, every tool, including the USB SATA adapter and hard drive dock and screwdrivers and even the Lazy Susan and the cables I'm using and the cameras I use, they're all in that Amazon store. And if you make a purchase from my quote-unquote Amazon store, I'm an affiliate and I make a small commission, and it's a great anonymous way to support the channel. But yeah, lots of different options for you to choose from depending on what kind of solution you're looking for. BH Ringer wants to know, is the new GPU designed, or was it designated workstation to be compatible with the OS? The video card does not have to be designated as workstation. The option of having Windows 10 Pro Workstation Edition is to have the ability to take advantage of certain functions within some programs that deal with high memory usage, as well as certain types of graphics cards like Quadro series graphics cards. It doesn't hinder anything, and it doesn't cause any issues if these are not things you're using or a way that you're using the computer. If anything, it's something that is appropriate for this build, but how the customer uses it at the end of the day will be entirely up to the customer. There won't be any noticeable difference in Windows 10 from a customer's perspective, unless they're running something that specifically needs Windows 10 for workstations, in which case they'll let you know if you didn't sell that to them, because they won't be able to do their job. This gentleman, the way they describe they're using the computer, this machine's probably going to be a bit overkill for them for a while, but we'll see how they grow into it. And as it is right now, it's mostly set up more like a gaming machine than a real proper workstation based on its configuration. But you don't have to have workstation enabled hardware to run the workstation operating system. Mira Ora says, I'll be using it for a SATA solid state drive. So I normally just use a little cable. Usually I have them under here. Yeah, I've got a couple under here. There's 3 different ones I have. I have a It's JS Flux. This is a USB Type-C. This one, this is like a $10 generic. It's got little lights that show power and whether the drive is reading or writing. And it's a little bit longer of a cord. And then finally I have this one here. Are these two the same? So you can see they're very inexpensive. I mean, all three of these together was probably under $30. Sometimes a lot of the modern laptops only have USB Type-C ports now, and I'm tired of using adapters on my adapters, right? Because this is an adapter. So then to have to adapt that to a Type A or to adapt this to a Type-C is adding another adapter to my adapter. It's just maddening. So I have a variety of these of different lengths for, as I mentioned, various purposes. They sell for, I'd say, $7 to $25, depending on the brand. So, yeah. Or you can just get a regular traditional hard drive dock and just set the drive down in it. The benefit of those is they do provide power. A 2.5-inch solid state drive doesn't require anything more than the USB power that USB provides. So if that's all you're going to use it for, I just look for the cheapest one. There's $7.77 coming in from our good friend Alan Lindas, joining us up in Casa Grande, Arizona. He says he just returned from Minnesota on his 50th high school class reunion. It was delayed by 2 years. Oh, his reunion was delayed by 2 years because of COVID, but here's my late charge. Fun times, fun times. Miraora says, I found the SATA to USB adapter on your Amazon. It's only $7, so I'll add 2 of them to my cart and order them Friday, one for my PC and one for my NVIDIA Shield Pro. Right on. Morton says he's got the third one I was holding and it works great. They all work good. It just depends on whether or not it meets your needs. Planet Cryos contributes $5, says, howdy partner, I just made an LED neon sign for my PK logo. It was fun to make and bright. Anyway, hope all is well. Very cool, very cool. I'll look forward to seeing that. You have to send me a picture of it. I was going to plug my keyboard. I guess I can plug the keyboard in right up here, right up front. Sure I can. There we go. Nope, goes the other way. It only goes in one of 2 possible ways, but it always takes me 3 tries. All right, so. Oh, and Planet Cryos is a member for 5 months now here. Right on. Well, again, thank you so much, Planet Cryos. Let me, let's see here. Let me go back to camera 3. So we're on the Panasonic camera now. And let me take camera 3 down a little bit here. Bring it into a little square. And let's power on, let's see, HDMI input. Oh, I see what I just did there. Okay. Now let me power this on and you'll get an idea of how fast this boots, and then we can go over all of the specs of the machine. Probably have to turn the power supply on first. Let's try this again. Let's power it up. Here we go. Now initially you will hear the fans crank up and then they'll become nearly dead silent once the system initializes. So unless we're really pushing the system hard, you won't even know the system's on. It's that quiet. That's pretty good for an open air case, right? I mean, consider that. Mark Gaines became a member for 5 months. Right on. Well, thank you, Mark. And Mark Baggett became a member for 5 months. You guys rock. I appreciate you so much. So let's take a look at what our specifications are now with the OS. Let me just make that a little bit smaller and we'll push it off to the side here. And I need to go full screen on my side because I can't see it as well as you guys can at home. So first things first, let's take a look at our specs. So right click on the computer icon and go to properties. And here we can verify that we have the Ryzen Threadripper 3960X, 24 cores, 48 threads, 128 gigs of DDR4 RAM with 4 empty sockets. So if we bought another kit of 4 sticks of 128, we'd have 256 gig of RAM possible, very easily adjusted. If we look at there were Windows 10 Pro for Workstations, and everything is updated and activated and happy. Then, of course, the solid state drive. We've got the Samsung Magician software down here, and if we bring that up, we can see we've got the Samsung 970 EVO Plus 2 terabyte, which is a great Gen 3 drive. But this new FireCuda 530 from Seagate is twice the capacity at 4 terabytes and twice the read and write speeds, which seems more appropriate, in my opinion, for a build of this caliber. So what we'll end up doing, oh, I was going to check that video card. I'll just look in the device manager and see what I put in there. It's been a while. This is not the original video card the machine was built with. I did put the original build video and follow-up build video in the video notes if you guys didn't get a chance to see this being built, and my trepidation and concern with my history with Threadripper. Spoiler alert, it all turned out perfect. Let's see, display adapters, what do we have here? So tiny. I gotta walk over to the screen and read it. It's a 2080 Ti. Okay. That's what's in there. And we want to put a 3090 Ti is what we want to put in. When it's all said and done, you're looking at, well, at the time it was about a $6,000 build. By today's standards, it probably still is a $6,000 build. The power supply has come down in price a bit. The CPU has gone up in price. The motherboard isn't even available anymore. And RAM, I think, has come down a bit in price since then, too. And, of course, the 4 terabyte Gen 4 drives have come down in price. So the best thing I can do is to use a Cronus so I don't have to reinstall everything from scratch and clone this drive onto this brand new one, and then we can run Crystal Diskmark on it. So for the sake of comparison, if we run Crystal Diskmark on this Samsung 970 EVO Plus 2 terabyte drive, then you can really get a feel for just how much faster the Seagate Barracuda or FireCuda is. Let me just, I must be in 4K on this screen. Yeah, let me drop that to 1080 because it's a little bit tough for me to see. Okay, so now we're 1920 by 1080. That's better. I can see much better now. And then let me grab my utilities flash drive, and let's grab Crystal Diskmark. We'll put that over on this machine. Lots of USB ports. You get so many lanes of traffic on a Threadripper. We've got 10, 11 USB ports back here, plus 2 more up front, a total of 13. So shouldn't run out of USB ports for a while. And I want the Crystal Diskmark software, which is located under my PC testing software folder. Let's grab that and drag it out. And then I can just pull this drive, set it aside for now. So let's see what our baseline is. Now, I know when I tested this prior, it's doing exactly what a Samsung 970 EVO Plus should be doing, which is around 34 to 3600 on the reads and sequential reads, and somewhere between 3200 and 3500 on the writes. When you get into these cheaper NVMe drives, you run into endurance ratings that are much lower, speed ratings that are lower, but then you're also going to pay less. These drives have an insane endurance. These Seagate FireCuda 530s have like 1,000 times more or 100 times more of an endurance rating than I've ever seen before. Normally you get a 3-digit number for endurance terabytes written. This is like a 5,000 or some crazy high number of terabytes written for endurance. And I've never seen a solid state drive get worn out before. When they wear out, they become read-only. They don't crash, they don't fail, they just become write-locked. Essentially, all the data that's on it becomes read-only. And that means you've worn your drive out. There's no more writes available. If you've ever done that, let me know, because I've never met a human being on the planet who's ever encountered that, except for people who are in testing, who have, put a drive through a torture chamber to figure out how long it would take for it to fail. That's the only exception. As you can see, we're right there at 3568 on our sequential reads, that top number on the left. On the right, I'm expecting a number just slightly smaller, maybe by about 200, so maybe 3,300, 3,400 range, which we'll see here in just a moment. It's finishing up the final sequence of read tests there on the left side. And I'm not really interested in the other tests so much as I'm interested in the biggest, best performance under an ideal circumstance, which is a big sequential read or a big sequential write. That shows me this is what the drive is capable of at its best. Everything else depends on how you use it. For me, doing videos, I do write a lot of large files, moving videos back and forth. They're very large files. So it does actually matter to me. But as a system builder, for me to ensure that I've got everything built and configured correctly, I always want to make sure that I'm testing it to see under the best of circumstances that it's performing as it should, so that the customer then, if they have any issues, I know it's not this. You understand what I'm saying? So when I run benchmarks, I'm not running them to break benchmarking records. I'm not running benchmarks to compare my system as being better than somebody else's. I'm doing it to establish if the hardware is running within the operable range that would be considered acceptable by my standards of what that hardware is supposed to deliver. Performance very much varies on the user. The type of piano you get doesn't make you a better piano player, and a machine that has faster storage doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be any more productive if you, as the user, take advantage of that. However, the reason we want to upgrade this isn't just for performance, it's also for capacity. So to go from a 2 terabyte drive to a 4 terabyte seems more in line with a machine this caliber, as I normally install 2 terabyte drives on my mid-tier and higher builds. So to go to 4 terabytes in storage is sort of the top shelf. I don't do too many top shelf builds. And the ones that I have done have primarily been specifically for the channel and have just been sold by chance. So the Big Beast build, that didn't have a buyer planned, but a buyer turned up. This build had no buyer planned, but a buyer turned up. So they were done for the experience and to share that experience with you guys so that you got an unfiltered raw look at what the process is really like, how much money is really spent, and what it's like to live with after you build it. Sometimes people review stuff they've had for a few days, and then they recommend whether you should buy it based on a very limited amount of time of living with it. And if it's something that you're depending on and you're relying on from day to day, I think it's just a little irresponsible to make a buy or not buy recommendation when you haven't really had much time with it. On the other hand, you spend so much time with something before you feel comfortable about recommending it, and there's a good chance they don't make it anymore, that it's been replaced with another version. So, there's pros and cons to both sides of it. But just kind of take a look at these numbers there, 3568, 3354. When we put the Seagate FireCuda 530 in here, I expect those numbers to be twice what you're seeing. So we should see about 7,000 or a little bit more on the reads, and maybe just a little under 7,000 on the writes, although I'm not quite sure if it writes that fast. And we can read all the documentation and we can see all the specs. Not all motherboards perform equally. Not all CPUs perform equally. So the idea that just because you have one fast part that you saw somebody in a video or read an article on Reddit talk about how great this part was. If you don't pair it with all the other hardware that it's connected to, you may not get similar results. It's all connected together. So just bear that in mind. It's a lot of stuff that's left out of a lot of reviews, both in videos and in writing. They talk about this CPU is best for gaming, but they don't really talk about the motherboard, which is crazy because how a CPU performs is very, very strongly related to your motherboard, as well as your RAM and your storage. So you could have the fastest CPU in the world and hook it up to an old IDE hard drive, and your computer's gonna be very slow. So all of these parts, you can't just buy one part and then expect the same results you saw in the video or read in the article. You have to make sure that all of the parts, at least the critical ones, which would be your motherboard, your RAM, your storage, and even your power supply, some cheaper power supplies, especially on a system of this caliber where you're going to be potentially drawing in over 1,000 watts of power. Gamers Nexus did a video on the power dropping out on these cheaper power supplies. And so, again, that's going to affect your performance. It'd be like having a fast car, but putting old bald tires on it, or having a transmission that's not fully operational. These are very much directly related to how that car is going to perform. So just bear all that in mind. It's all a balance. It's not just one component. The most important thing that determines how fast a computer is, in many cases, is the user themselves. And I can't do anything to speed up the user. If that's how slow they type, that doesn't matter how fast the processor is. If their brain just kind of moves at a slower pace and the system's just constantly waiting for them to, move it to the next, tell the computer to move to the next step, there's nothing I can sell that person to make them any faster. If I'm giving a fast computer to a sloth, it's still a sloth that's using the computer. So the end users on high-end systems like this, a lot of times are the main bottleneck these systems suffer from. When they're used in, for the reasons these are designed in workflows, that's a different story entirely. But when these are put into people's homes, a lot of times it's just, it's done for reasons of having something nice, not necessarily that they require it, but that perhaps they feel they deserve it, and perhaps they feel like if they have it, they'll be more inclined or likely to take advantage of it, versus if they don't have it, then they would never learn those things or to use those types of tools that would require that kind of power, because it would be discouraging to use it on an old, slow machine. So there's a number of reasons why people buy machines like this for home use, but for the most part, it's overkill for most home users. That doesn't mean a home user can't have one, and then there's nothing illegal about having something that's overkill. But I do want you to keep in mind when you do read reviews and watch videos, when they're measuring the power, you got to wonder, how's that going to help you? When you spend that money for that additional power, unless you're flush with cash and you don't miss the money, where's your return on your investment? So I try to keep everything here as practical as I can and give advice that I would to all of my customers before they drop a large amount of money down on a high-end system. This computer is as much a showpiece as it is a workhorse. And there's sort of an art, a functional art to this build. And I am very impressed with it. If I haven't made that clear, I went into this with a very high skepticism and expecting it, here we go again. And this was a complete opposite. Everything worked really, really well on it. So, and I think it just went to sleep on me here because I've been yabbering on. Yeah, that's what it did. So let me go ahead and close this out, and let's go ahead and shut the machine down. And let's start with that. So we'll shut this down, power it off, and then let me come back over here to main. Let's see, we'll be up back on the Panasonic camera. Yeah. And let me catch up with the chat room here. Gregory McCutcheon says, big hello to Kerry and everyone in the chat from Melton, South. Here on the outskirts of Melbourne, Australia. Cheers, guys. Great to see you. Still going strong, Kerry, and it's 4 years for me, too. Right on. $20 super chat contribution from Craig Casabona. Hey, Kerry, nice to see you again live. Right on, Craig. Thank you. Good to see you, my friend. Planet Cryos with a $15 super chat says, I just sent you an email with a picture of the sign. It can be seen on my latest YouTube video also. If I don't say it later, have a great vacation. Well, thank you, Planet Cryos, and I'll take a look at that here in a minute. $10 super chat from the Greek says, what's up, Kerry? Let's get the super chat train going. Well, that's kind of you. Thank you. Okay, where do I begin? Well, I suppose we got to take this glass panel off. I recommend you leave one of the top, these are like thumb screws for the glass. If we take out the top ones first, then it has a tendency to want to fall out. So there is a method to my madness here on how I'm choosing to remove the glass panel, and I just wanted one of these two thumb screws to remain just so the glass doesn't fall forward. Also, I don't recommend you tighten these down any more than finger strength, even though there's a little, looks like a Allen wrench type head in there. You will crack the glass if you over tighten it. I didn't think this cooler was going to work very well. I was wrong. This cooler works fantastic. And I was also wrong about the amount of RAM. Well, there is 128 gigs. I'm doing what appears to be two kits of 64. So each one of these sticks must be 16 gigs, so 16, 32, 48, 64. So there's 4 on one side and then 4 on the other. So I thought, I was remembering it incorrectly. I thought that we were using 4 sticks totaling 128 and that they were 32 gigs each. So there are no empty slots here. So 128 is fine. That should suit this customer for indefinitely. Otherwise, they would have to replace all the RAM. You wouldn't want to do 2 different sizes. You can, but again, on a machine of this caliber, to go from 128 to 256, you'd have to replace all 8 sticks. That would be very pricey. Now, where the heck is the NVMe drive in here? I suspect it's behind this monstrous graphics card. So let's go ahead and turn the power supply off and pull the power cable. We don't want to work inside of the computer with the power cable plugged in. It's just a dangerous thing to do. Safety is always my first concern. And I should probably get this antenna out of my way because I know we're gonna be running into that some more. Just trying to imagine where the M.2 drives. This motherboard should have several M.2 slots on it. It's been a while since I've looked at it, but you can see this graphics card is so thick. It's covering a large section. We can't really see it very well. I'd have to go back and look at my own build video. I've had so many computers going out these last few weeks that I can't keep anything straight anymore. I can't remember what's what. It's been kind of crazy, but the benefit, I suppose, of going on vacation is it forces me to tie up a lot of loose ends that I've been procrastinating on. So that's the good thing, is it gets things done. If it wasn't for the last minute, nothing would ever get done. But there's a couple ways I can go about this. So I can take the video card out, install the FireCUDA into a second M.2 slot. I can use a docking bay for NVMe drives, or put this in an NVMe enclosure and go through the USB port. which will be slower than going internally, but won't require the removal of the graphics card. I could install this one where the Samsung is and pull the Samsung out and do it the other way around, put the Samsung in the enclosure and clone it the other way. The fastest way is to have both NVMe drives installed on the same motherboard internally, because then you're running at full NVMe speed. You're not bottlenecked through USB or adapters. And so the length of time it'll take will be minimized. So if time is money, this is the way to go. On the other hand, if you're averse to removing the video card, you're afraid of breaking something, then doing the external enclosure is a lot safer, even though it'll take a little longer. There's no right or wrong way, it's just really a choice. And do know that there's always multiple ways of accomplishing the same task. And while some ways are faster, some ways are also more error prone or more risky. At the end of the day, as long as you get to the end result you wanted and you're okay with what you had to do to get there, then you did it right. But if what you're doing is spending a lot of time and effort and even potentially money and not getting the end result you wanted, then I would suggest you didn't do it correctly. So that's how we're just determining if it's right or not. Sometimes people confuse their own personal preferences with a particular protocol or procedure that they themselves define as sort of the one proper way. But you know, I get so sick of that online. The beauty of the PC is so much individualism, from the hardware that we select, our freedom of choice, to what our priority is. Our priority might be storage, our priority might be gaming, our priority might be overclocking just for the sake of overclocking. But that's for nobody else to determine. That's strictly your own personal value. So I've never worked with one of these Seagate FireCuda 530s before. I was reading Maximum PC Magazine, and they were just, and PC World Magazine, we're just talking about how great this drive was. The PC World said it was face-meltingly fast. I am skeptical. And they also were praising the Western Digital SN850 for being almost as fast, but about $50 cheaper than this for the same capacity. Oh, it's wrapped in a little anti-static bag. That's interesting. And it's sealed. Look at that. All right. So this drive is $550, 4 terabytes. Let me bring it up to the camera, and we'll see if this camera will focus as nice as that other one just did. Ugh, it's really washed out. See, this is the struggle. See, this is the problem. So if I go back to the other camera, this will make it look like nothing. I mean, it'll just work. Watch. We'll go over to this camera. So let's see. Yeah, I might be a liar. Getting a lot of reflection. And then the other side. At least that side worked. It's just that bright white is just reflecting the lights really bad. Anyway, that's a 4 terabyte FireCuda drive. And yeah, I can definitely see I look a little fuzzy there, don't I? And then it puts me in focus and makes everything around me look a little fuzzy. It's sort of, this camera picks something to focus on. I'm sure there's a button somewhere I can press and just say focus the whole thing. And $5 again from Planet Cryos comes in through Super Chat and says, forgot to mention it was my birthday last week and I'm now over the hill. Well, happy birthday to Planet Cryos. Welcome to the club. Welcome to the hill. Now, I'm curious what's behind this graphics card. There's got to be another M.2 slot on here. I know it's got more than one. And I'll grab my red screwdriver. And now some serious work is about to happen. Things just got real. All right, there's one. There's two. And how am I going to release this video card? Well, as you remember, I did make that with the help of a viewer and a friend. I was able to 3D print a prototype of a GPU removal tool idea that I had to be able to slide this between the heatsink and the graphics card to release the latch that's holding the graphics card in right about there. And this tool, again, it's just a prototype. It's pretty flimsy. Got my logo on the end. This is 3D printed. And we were messing around with the thickness of this shaft and how we were going to make the end piece. So that's where it was left off. I was trying to find a manufacturer and just couldn't find a manufacturer that, you know, with COVID and everything happening, it was certainly not my field of expertise, but I wanted to get a quote to have some made and then potentially offer them for sale here. And, you know, that's once we've isolated out a good prototype. And that is a good prototype. That's why I haven't refined it any further than that. And then as far as finding a manufacturer, I have no idea what our minimum order is going to be or who to talk to about it. But maybe something I revisit next year, or we'll just have to wait and see if motherboard manufacturers start having a release button like Asus introduced on last year on one of their boards. I just have to find the release. It should be. Ah, there it is. It is right there. Is that it? Yeah, that's it right there. You can see it, the tool is just barely about that much. If it was that much shorter, it wouldn't. The tool wouldn't be long enough. The heatsink would block us. Okay. It's a little tricky. A little bit tricky. Bear with me here as I struggle through this. It's almost like a two-person job to get this video card out, I'll tell you what. Go on now. Let's see here. Let's go this way. Come on, you latch. Well, that's a little bit more difficult than I thought it was going to be. These parts are expensive, so I definitely want to take our time and not force anything. The old school way I would have to do to get this out would be a long straight edge screwdriver. Like that, just an old school. It's a shame when my own tool that I designed for this purpose isn't cutting it, but it just goes to show you it could use a little more refining and real world experimentation or usage, because every build is a bit unique with how we release the graphics card, again, depending on what cooler you've got, what graphics card you've got, which motherboard you've got. Come on now. There it goes. There it went. Now it should just pop out. Okay. And you can see we've got a bit of dust on here that I've got to wipe down. And let's just set this aside, and I imagine our M.2s are right underneath here. Nicholas Menard contributes 10 Canadian dollars via Super Chat. Nicholas said, I'm glad I could catch a little bit of Carrie tonight. How are you? Are you looking forward to your more than well-earned Michigan vacation? I know I do for you. Keep on rocking the computers, my man. Right on. Thank you, Nicholas. Yeah, I really needed a vacation last month. I'm hanging in there by hairs. I'm telling you. Between the amount of heat and humidity, big rainstorm last night, which brought the temperatures down, but there's been a number of projects here at Studio B that have taken a lot of my time, as well as a number of projects here with regards to my business, one of which I still have one left. I had a friend bring a system to me. He says it won't stay on. It was like a Lenovo desktop system, and worked just fine for me. So I tuned it up, turned it on, turned it off a few times, left it on, couldn't replicate the problem. My friend picked it up, brought it back to his house, immediately won't turn. He made a video and showed me. It turns on and then it just shuts itself off. I don't know. So he decided he was going to change his RAM out, and he did. And he goes, there, now it's working. He gives it to his son. It's his son's computer. His son plugs it in, it turns on and turns off again. Right? It's the original symptom. So there's nothing more frustrating than these kind of intermittent problems. My guess now is it's power supply. These Lenovo's use an FSP power supply, and just not seeing very good reliability out of them. As a result of the recent experience with FSP, also talked with Anthony Remis, who also shared he had issues, quality issues with FSP. I'm jumping to the power supply. I'm going to assume that's what's going on, but there's no time now for him to bring it back for me to look at it again, and so he'll change the power supply out. In fact, today Amazon has the EVGA 500 watt power supply for $32. These power supplies right here, and I posted it today in my in the community area of YouTube on my channel. This is the EVGA 500. It's called a W3. I use these a lot. These are today, and I don't know that this will be on sale tomorrow, but today at Amazon here in the US, $32 and free shipping. You can't beat that. You cannot beat that. And so the system, that Lenovo system had like a 400 watt FSP in there. So I'm like, if I were you, I'd just get this EVGA one. And I told him that yesterday. Yesterday it was $35. Today it's $32, but it says it's a limited deal, and those sometimes only last 24 hours. So just so you know, $5 just came in from Michael Dane. He says, I see you working on that nightmare of a case. Oh, this isn't, oh no, this is easy. What, are you kidding me? This case is super easy to work on. The nightmare of the case is the train PC, especially considering I have to take it all back apart, and I would like to get that done and shipped out before I leave. So between this one, the train PC, and then I've got a client's computer here that I need to scan for viruses and pull the customer's data off, put it onto a build I've got sitting here for them, brand new computer, and then deliver that to their office. So if I can get all three of those done by the end of this week, then when I go on vacation, I'll have nothing pressing. All the projects I have beyond that have no timeline. They have no deadline or, what's the word I want? Due date. They're just channel projects. So, but thank you for the contribution. Michael, speaking of FSP, yeah, I sent that FSP power supply that FSP sent to me for Michael, for him to use, and it blew up. So I ended up sending Michael a, what'd I send you? EVG or an NZXT, I think. NZXT makes good power supplies too. All right, so I believe what we want to get at is right behind this heatsink right there. And let me go back over to the Panasonic camera. I just noticed the focus keeps changing on this camera a lot. I don't know what you guys, how you feel about that, but I do feel like the Panasonic camera is looking way better today. Yeah, so that's the Panasonic camera there. So let me just take another look at what we got going on right here. Yeah. Let me grab a screwdriver. Which one do I want to use? I think we'll use the JIS. And I'll get my glasses so's I can see. All right, let's take a look. Should be this one here. We have 3 screws. And I believe it holds the screws captive. I seem to remember that. Unless I'm confusing this with another build, which could be very, very possible. Sticky thermal tape. There we go. Yeah, so that's the underside of the heat shield. And there's our other M.2 right there. And I always leave the screw in the standoff, so I don't have to go looking for it, or the customer won't have to go looking for it if 2 years from now or whenever they want to add another M.2. So we grab the Firekuda, and that's going to go in this direction. Only goes in one way. Like so. And then when I load up Acronis, I can just clone from the 970 down to the Firekuda. It'll automatically format partition and resize the partitions according to the size of the drive. I don't have to do anything manually. And I don't want to stick that 2080 Ti back in there. I don't know why I keep calling it a 2090. Because it's a pain in the rear to get it out. So I think I'll just grab some small little graphics card I've got laying around here somewhere. Bear with me for a second. You can tell I really need to go on vacation. I am so frazzled. All right, here's a GeForce. What is this? This is a GeForce something or nothing. That's how to work. This one doesn't require any power. So we'll just use this for right now. This is what I think we were using as a temporary card in the Big Beast build. This is great for diagnostics because it's easy to pop it in and pop it out. And not requiring any power is a benefit, and I don't have to change the video drivers. I keep stepping on this Ethernet cable for some reason. All right. Just got to align that with the slot. There it goes. I'm not going to screw it down because it's just going to be temporary for us to do the clone. So we can plug the HDMI cable back in there, like so. And we can give the power supply power again. Flip the switch to on. Well, that puts our RGB on, but the system's not on. But it does have power flowing through it. When your system is off, it still has power going through it. And I'm I have an Acronis rescue disk that I'm going to boot from. You guys have seen me do this. I'm assuming, unless you're new here, you've seen me do this countless times over the years. I've been using Acronis for so many years. And we'll hopefully have another Acronis offer for you shortly after I get back from vacation. Maybe as we head into November, we'll run another special. Just so you know, got that to look forward to. So let me plug this in to any USB port back here. And we'll turn this, wait, before I turn it on. Before I do that, because this thing is fast, I don't want to miss the boot options. So let's get myself over here like so. Okay, push that button, and we'll get ready to hit, was it F12, I think, or delete? Boy, it's not liking this graphics card or something. Just give that a second to initialize. Delete. There it goes. Oh, did I miss it? As soon as I looked away, that's when it came up. It was like, press F2 or delete. Whoopsie. Well, it's not going to take very long for us to boot, but let's skip the disk checking. That's the machine we named Thready's Revenge. And then, let's see. Do this the lazy way, I suppose. Since we booted into Windows, I can just tell Windows to reboot to the flash drive. So let's go full screen for me so I can see. Oh, look, we're back into 4K again because it just reloaded the graphics drivers for this different graphics card. So let's drop that back. Oh, all right, well, apparently it hasn't loaded that driver, so it's not going to let me change the resolution until I do. So for right now, it doesn't matter. Let's just go to Update and Security, and then we'll go to I think it's Troubleshoot. No, Recovery. We go to Recovery and hit Restart Now. And it's not actually going to restart. It's bringing up a restart menu here. We want to use a device, UEFI SanDisk Extreme Pro. That's a flash drive I just plugged in, partition 1. So that's going to be the Acronis flash drive, and I'm telling it to restart to the flash drive, so I don't have to deal with that pressing F2 or delete or whatever the key is to override the boot order. So it's just as long as the flash drive is plugged in while you're in Windows, and it's initialized, like Windows has recognized, hey, you got a flash drive plugged in, then that option should appear. Now that funky green lines and stuff, that's coming off the video card. That has nothing to do with the system. Not too worried about that, since that's not the graphics card the customer is going to get. I don't know why the graphics card's doing that. I'm not real happy about it, but I'm hoping that's just a visual glitch that won't affect what we're about to do. We're going to go to Tools, and I cannot see the screen. Holy cow, it is super tiny. I know you guys at home can probably see this better than I can, but let me just walk around and take a look. Well, there's a combination of distorted video, Tools, clone a disk, automatic. Select the source. The source is the Samsung 970 EVO. Hit next. It won't offer us the FireCuda as a source because it's not partitioned, therefore there's nothing to copy. So I like that Acronis is smart enough to not make that as an option for you to select, but it is an option for our target. This last drive, that's the drive, the flash drive we're booting from. But anyway, that's going to be our target. and we're going to use it to replace a disk on this machine. So this is what the drive looks like now. It's unformatted and unpartitioned, and when it's done, it'll have these partitions, and the green line represents how much data is on the partition. And we just select proceed and let that roll, and this should happen relatively quickly, especially compared to doing a clean install. And so while that's running, if you guys have questions for me in the chat, I'll do my best to provide answers for you. Kelly Stewart says, Carrie, as usual, check your phone. Oh yeah, he's going to check my phone with Planet Krause's email too. Let's see what we got going on here. Let's see. Okay, yeah, there's Planet Krause's neon sign. Oh, that looks good. And Kelly Stewart sends a $50 Amazon gift card. Well, right on. Well, thank you so much, Kelly, as always. And I always send a little thank you back through Amazon system. So if you don't get those thank yous on Amazon gift cards, that either means I didn't get your gift card or your response is in the spam folder. But thank you guys for continuing to support the channel and for your friendship, of course. The Greek says, hey, it's a members only night. Yeah, we're trying to do the members only stuff. I want to do, 8 out of every 10 videos I want to be members only as far as like live goes. It's really about the interaction. I just don't need the bored people looking for their cheap thrills to interfere and disrupt our broadcasts. So unfortunately, that's a problem that's only going to get worse. And so we've shut it down this way, and everybody can still watch the videos. It's just about the live interaction. They can still leave comments on the videos regardless after the video's aired. It's just the live interaction is very much abused by spammers and bots and troublesome people that have how can we say things that perhaps a doctor could assist them with. I can't help them. All right, you can see the clone is already done. It happened relatively quickly. And we'll go ahead and shut the machine off now. So I'll just hit the power button and hold it in until the machine shuts off. There we go. And Planet Krause contributes $3 and then $2. Well, thanks again, Planet Krause. And let's go full screen back on the Panasonic here. Now my new camera just shut off. It just overheated and shut down. So I'm glad I was on this camera when that happened. And we'll let it cool off. I was kind of curious if that was going to happen and how long it was going to take. We went, once again, turn off the power supply, and you'll see that the LEDs stayed on for a few seconds because there was still power in the capacitors. So we want all that to drain because that's far more dangerous to create a short circuit when adding and removing components than worrying about any sort of electrostatic discharge. The electrostatic discharge wouldn't impact anything if you watch how I touch the parts, where I'm holding the parts. Any shock that I might have or any static buildup I might have would dissipate into a grounding area and not into the components because of how I hold the components. So I like to remind you guys of that because sometimes I fall into these routines and I make this assumption that you've heard me say this a million times. And while that's true for some of you, it's not true for all of you. For some of you, this may be the first video you've ever seen of me, right? And so all these things I keep repeating that the regulars are well aware of, it's all new news to new viewers. So used to have to do that in radio. We used to have to always reintroduce the show and who the guest was after every commercial because listeners come and go, might be driving in the car, flipping through stations. They might just tune in. They don't know what show they just tuned into, who you are, who you're interviewing. And so every single time we'd come back from commercial, we have to reintroduce who we are, who our guest is. And that got maddening after a while, especially when there were a lot of commercial breaks. So if you wonder why I get to be so repetitive, it's just because there's always new viewers. And well, we do hope they'll stick around. If they're nice people, they want to be a part of this community, we'd love to have them. If they're jerks or they're elitist snobs, then we don't want them to be part of the community. They can go somewhere else. We won't miss them. But what was I doing? Oh, I was going to get my JIS driver. We're going to pull that Samsung 970 Evo out. Let's bring this back around here. So yeah, we're going to take this drive out. And I don't want to remove the tape underneath the thermal tape. There's like a protection. So I'm going to reverse positions and put the Firacuda where the Samsung is. So we're going to take the Samsung out. And we'll just set that aside. And then move the Firacuda up. And then that way, like I said, I don't have to disrupt the thermal tape that's being protected right now. So when and if the customer ever wants to add a second M.2, that thermal tape will be fresh and ready to use. But we can boot from either slot. It's not as though it had to be up there for any other reason. And before I put the heat shield back on and before I put everything back together, I need to make sure my clone worked. Sometimes the clones may not work for reasons of UEFI not being, not booting into a UEFI mode, but cloning a UEFI-based operating system or UEFI configured. And then you're like, hey, it said it was cloned and now it won't boot. So that happens sometimes. I don't think it's going to happen, but I just want to double check before I put things back together. And then we'll see if this video card still gives us corruption. So let's plug that back in. Make sure the card's fully seated. Power supply back on. Come back around and power this bad boy back up, and let's see if it now boots back into Windows as though no change was made. So it should be very transparent. Take me down over here. And see what happens. The Greek says he needs the email address for me. It's my name, Kerry@kerryholzman.com. There's no T in my name. If you send the gift card to the wrong email address, I won't get it. So Kerry@kerryholzman.com. I'll type it in the chat room for you. Okay, that looks good. And I have to go, what, full screen, right? Yeah, you know that by now. Full screen. Oh, it looks like it puts back in 1080. This is good. Okay, so let's run Crystal Diskmark and let's see what kind of numbers we get. This is my first time using a Seagate Firacuda 530. And from the trusted sources that I go to for my technology news, they say this thing is the king of the Gen 4 NVMe drives for consumer use. I expect to see 7,000 or better. Oh, there it is. Yeah. On the reads, and we should see, I don't know what we're supposed to see on the writes. Is it similar, or is it like a little bit slower, like 5,000 on the writes? I mean, based on how they were talking about it, speeds of up to 7 gigabytes per second. Yeah, yeah. Up to 2 times faster than Gen 3 PCIe NVMe SSDs. Yeah, yeah. Let's checking out what that's what I've heard. It says 7250 megabytes per second. Okay, well, we didn't get 7250, but we're definitely over 7,000. And while that's running, again, if you have questions for me in the chat, I'll do my best to provide answers for you. Rob Gurley with a $5 contribution says, great to be with you and our incredible community. God bless. Well, thank you, Rob. Thanks for supporting the channel and for being a part of our community here. Hope you'll stay a part of it for a long time. Linda Hudson, also there, jumping in, saying hello. Always good to see Linda Hudson. Mark Gaines with a £4 contribution. I just missed that one earlier. Thank you again, Mark. I'm very curious on what our sequential write speeds are going to be. If they're going to be at 7,000, I'll be impressed. Usually write speeds are a bit slower than read speeds on NVMe drives, but the more money you spend, the more the gap closes between those two things. No, we don't need to reactivate Windows 10. Windows 10 is tied to the motherboard. So you can pretty much, should be able to change out all the components you want without requiring activation, with some exceptions if you're going a little overboard. But can guarantee if you change the motherboard out, you're going to require a new activation. And these are OEM license keys that I use, meaning they're tied to the motherboard. They're not intended to be moved. If you're doing a motherboard replacement because of a part failure, say your motherboard died, then Microsoft, in theory, if that's the case, they would reactivate for you. But if you're changing the motherboard out for any reason other than that, then Microsoft will say you need to buy another key. So, oh, the write speed is not good. 2792, that's not good at all. So here's a couple of things. One, we left the Samsung NVMe driver in there, and I want to take that out. Two, I've got the Samsung Magician software in there, and I don't think there's any performance settings on that. So I want to remove both the Samsung NVMe driver and the Samsung Magician software and reboot and run this test again, because there's no way that's acceptable. 2792 is not right. Should be at least twice that. In fact, I think I'll go ahead and abort the test because I don't need to see anything else. So again, when I'm running these quote-unquote benchmarks, I'm not doing it to have a race. I'm doing it to evaluate how the unit is functioning, and if it's operating within boundaries of what would be acceptable performance. So let me go to Settings, Apps. Let's look under S for Samsung. Yeah, there's our NVMe driver. Let's go ahead and take it out. Now, well, the Samsung Magician software will see other drives. It doesn't really do anything with them. So there's no sense having the Samsung Magician software installed without any Samsung drives. Now, if Seagate has a utility, I'm not aware of it, we might look and see. But you know, Intel has their utility, but now Intel sold off their SSD division to SK Hynix, which has rebranded it as Solidign, S-O-L-I-D-I-G-N. And so everything that's labeled, any solid state drive that's labeled with Intel is probably going to get a firmware update to relabel it as Solidign. It's like a branding firmware update, but not a necessary firmware update, just in case you were wondering why you might see a firmware update. Let me go ahead and remove the Samsung Magician software. Let's clear that out. And this computer is very, very fast, and it's just crazy to see how many threads this thing has. If we do a Control-Alt-Delete on this, go to the Task Manager, then go to the Performance Monitor. Let's go under Performance, and down here, open the Resource Monitor. And we look at our CPU. Each one of these is a CPU core. Count them all. Look at each one of those cores. So, or threads rather. Well, that one's kind of busy. all the way to 47. It starts at 0, so 0 is 1, 1 is 2, 2 is 3, and 43 is 44. Right? That's why if you're wondering why we're 1 short, they start at 0. But that is a lot of cores. So yeah, 47 I meant. So it's a total of 48, not 44. It's 24 cores with 2 threads per core for a total of 48 threads. Words. Okay, I guess they want us to exit out of Samsung Magician. So, how do we do that? I've never had to exit out of Samsung Magician before. There isn't an exit. I guess we could just shut down the task, which should be alphabetized here in the list of running stuff. Oh, a lot of it. End. End. Oh, well, that one was the magic one, I guess, huh? And now, let's see if we can remove Samsung Magician. Sure, yeah. It's been removed, right on. Now I should reboot, but I am just kind of curious and impatient, so I'm gonna try this one more time. Disk info, or disk mark rather, 64-bit. Let's just do the read and write only. The sequential, which are the top numbers on the left and the top numbers on the right. Those are the ones I'm mainly focused on. That's a better number, right? It did say 7250 on the box, that we're right exactly where the box says we should be. Let's face it, being 1.67 away, when you're dealing with a number that big, we're there. And then on the rights, let's see if we see some more reasonable numbers. I laugh nervously. Well, I quietly am concerned. Here we go with the rights. Come on, baby. Ah, that is definitely not right. Those are the wrongs. We have the read speed and the wrong speed. Something that's not right. So I got to figure out what's happening with that, because yeah, it's no good. Let me go over to, all right, let's just stop this test. Stop. Let me go over to computer, right click on the C drive. Let me look at the properties under tools. Tools, check the system, optimize, no. Properties, volume, driver. Let's go under change settings. Enable write caching on the device. That's what we want. Turn off Windows write cache buffer. Don't want to do that. So that looks right. What if we turn that off? I mean, that should make everything worse in theory. Let's just make sure it does. It's more. We'll just do the sequential read and write tests. This should have no impact on the reads. The caching on the writes can make a big impact in a positive way or a negative way. But the write speeds are concerning me. Something's not configured correctly, because I know the drive can do way better than that. I don't know what it's supposed to do, but I imagine it's between 5,000 and 7,000, and we're not even close. Now, you just witnessed that blue screen. That's new. And that's a good reason why we reboot in between uninstalling and reinstalling programs, because we don't know if the error was caused due to that or if it was caused by turning off the write buffer. Not sure yet. So we're going to reboot. since I was too impatient to do it. Now we have to. And then we'll run that same benchmark one more time. That's the reality. That's the stuff I wish other YouTube channels would show. And there are others who do, folks like Doug Betts and Greg Salazar. Well, his videos are very, very highly edited and polished. He does include some of his frustration, but you're not there dealing with it in real time, so you don't really get the true sense of frustration when it's all edited for your convenience. It's definitely not as impactful, in my experience, or to me anyway, as a viewer. So let's go back over to Crystal Dismark, and one more time, we'll run those sequential tests. And once again, while that runs, let me just take a look in the chat and see what you guys are talking about. If you have any questions for me, I'll do my best to provide an answer. And of course, if you have an answer, feel free to offer that up as well. So in theory, by turning that write buffer off, the write speeds should be even slower than they were. So I'm kind of curious what number we're going to get. Yeah, they're definitely slower. That's for sure. All right, good. Good. Well, that checks out. So there is something else going on here. So let me go back to full screen mode. And we'll stop this test. And we're going to go back to the computer icon, right-click on the C drive, back under hardware, back under properties, under change settings, and policies. Well, it did enable write caching. I turned that off, so how did it get turned back on? You just check that now. Properties, it should be off. Okay, now let's turn it back on. And do this again. That read number is way too low. I wonder if Seagate has an NVMe driver that might be optimized for use with their drives. Probably worth looking into here. Just want to see those write speed numbers before yeah, they're pathetic. So apparently we're going to have to reboot for these changes to take effect because, first of all, nothing should have affected the read speed. The bottom line, that's not right. Let's close that out. And let's go ahead and do a complete shutdown. Let the system power off completely. And then once it's powered off, we'll wait a few seconds, power it back up, just to clear everything out of the circuitry, out of the RAM. And yeah, the fan just stopped spinning. So now let's fire it back up. As soon as it fires up, we'll go right back into Crystal Dismark without changing anything else and see if it's made any difference at all. I know those write speeds are supposed to be way faster than what they're showing. Oh, they gave us stickers. Oh. Clear decals. this little booklet that it comes with, it just looks like warranty information in 27 different languages. I don't see any indication that we should be going to the website to download anything. Read numbers are just inconsistent. Made in Thailand. Interesting. They make a lot of mechanical hard drives in Thailand. So I guess I shouldn't be surprised that they're making SSDs there. Yeah, our write speed's still pathetic. Very interesting. Let's go ahead and stop the test. And let's see. Stop. Seagate. Firecuda 530 driver. Downloads. What do we have for downloads? Firmware. Enter your serial number. Well, okay. Cookies. Data sheet and a user manual. C-tools. Disk Wizard. Secure your information by backing up your operating as well as erasing it securely. So they do have a couple of little tools here. Enter your serial. Okay. I mean, that's kind of weird. They can only tell me what firmware came with the drive. They can't tell me if it's been updated based off the serial number. They'd have to have a utility like Samsung Magician that can do this for you. Data sheet. Heatsink SSD. It shouldn't be getting that hot yet. In fact, these Gen 4 drives actually run a bit better when they run a little hot. They run a little faster. Firmware update. What is this? Okay, so my camera's probably covering up the download area there. It is. So if I turn that off temporarily, you can see it's downloading that file there. And Seagate Tools does firmware upgrades, Terrell says. Open this file and extract it. README first. Yeah, we have a bin. What do we use? Command line. Man. Windows. Win64. So is that only a command line tool? Okay. As administrator, maybe? Or not? C-tools. Learn more. C-tools 5 for Windows. Let's grab that. Because if that will do the firmware update for us, I would rather do that than a command line. Especially since I don't know what firmware I've got versus what I just downloaded. Okay, we'll run the C-tools installer. Next. Finish. English. Okay. Have to agree to the license, regardless. Okay. Self-test, drive details. Terabytes written, 379.64. That doesn't seem accurate. We only achronised it. That's all we've done. It was brand new in a box. I unsealed it. Utility. Tool update, create a bootable disk. I don't see anything about firmware here. Secure erasing. Advanced. Firmware update. Nothing. Hello. There's no firmware. Maybe that's what I got to click on that, maybe. Then go to firmware. Well, that's not obvious. Browse for the firmware update. So we can go to our download. Firmware. That's the bin file. Hit OK. So what did I have before? I wasn't paying attention to what this said. Did this change, guys? Assuming it changed. Results. Firmware started. Firmware update. Passed. All right, well, that was quick. Tell me what I had. Well, that's a little rough around the edges. Quick test, extended test, fix all. What does that do? That's more like for mechanical drives. Spin down, that's mechanical drives. Utilities, tool update. That's not working. That doesn't do anything. Oh. Okay. Well, this seems to be a work in progress, folks, but we did get the firmware updated. Now, usually when you update firmware, you need to shut the computer completely off. So let's go ahead and do that. Shut her down. And of course, it says no signal now, which is because I don't have any cameras running. So we'll bring me back up in the corner. And now when we turn the computer on, when you change the firmware of a drive, whether it's a solid state drive or any kind of a drive, when the computer restarts, it should detect it as a brand new drive. As far as the computer is concerned, that is a different drive now. Let's see what happens if it detects new hardware on boot up. Sometimes these machines, especially a machine like this, can do it so quickly you don't even see it happen. And then once we get the desktop up, give it just a second to load any drivers it might need to load or recognize the drive with the new firmware, we run Crystal Disk Mark on it again. Firmware didn't change, still SU6SM003. Okay, well, that's good to know. I don't know what the firmware version was that I downloaded and how it compares to what was shipped with the drive. So, kind of weird. Again, it's one of the things that I think is worth the Samsung Magician software, but getting Samsung NVMe drives is that Samsung Magician software, because it takes all the guesswork out of it. And some drive manufacturers don't even update their firmware. So what does that mean? They just made it perfectly, or they just abandoned their customers? I would assume the companies that don't do it are abandoning the customers. But what do I know? Let's go back to Crystal Disk Mark. Let's just do this, even though nothing should have changed. If we have the same firmware version we had, we should see the same numbers we've always seen. They haven't really changed anything. Well, that looks better. That's where it was initially before I started monkeying around. And and then does these 5 tests. If you look up here, it says 4 of 5. And it averages the 5 tests to give us a final number. Then it'll pause and clear out any cache. So it waits 5 seconds. Now it's going to do the sequential write, 1 of 5. It's preparing it. And here we go. Something's not right. Something ain't right. Let's let it complete. It's doing 4 of 5. And then 5 of 5. Now you see the Samsung drive didn't have whatever this issue is. This is sort of uniquely related to this drive here. Out of curiosity, I wonder if there might be a BIOS update for this motherboard that might explain this. I am a little concerned that the drive, according to the CTOOL software, has had that much data written to it, because that was sealed in the bag. I opened that bag, so for it to tell me that it's got, let's just do a self-test and see what it does. For it to tell me it had over 300 gigs written to it, we didn't write 300 gigs to it. And it's obviously not a used drive, or if somebody had this out and repackaged it, I mean, they sealed it perfectly. There's no tape over tape or anything like that. And this anti-static bag was completely sealed. So I'm kind of puzzled by that. Now it says terabytes written, 420 gigs. I mean, I don't know how many gigs we're writing on the Crystal Disk Mark test. That seems a bit excessive. Yeah, we could move the drive just into the other M.2 slot to see if it makes a difference. It shouldn't, but the only way you can know for sure is to test it. You can't make assumptions as a technician. You have to, you're not as a good tech, you actually have to test things. If you're just going to make assumptions and say, well, that can't be it, you might as well get into another job field, because you're not going to have a very good repair rate. Trust me, I know. Been there, done that. So because we have everything more or less already removed, it's no big deal to change it, just to verify the assumption here. Let's close that out. I don't think it's going to perform any differently in the other slot, but it could. Could be sharing data traffic with the video card. I mean, it shouldn't be, not with a CPU of this caliber, but who knows? Maybe just going into the BIOS. You know what? I want to try one thing here. Before we do anything else, let's go into the BIOS and let's load the setup defaults. Sometimes all you have to do is load the BIOS defaults. This is especially true after a BIOS update. A lot of times people do their BIOS updates and they go right back to using the computer. And I highly recommend that anytime you do a BIOS update, you load the setup defaults. It was a long time ago that I've updated this computer, so I can't remember if I followed my own procedure or not. So easy enough to check. I was not able to hit the key in enough time. The machine's too fast. So what I'm going to do is we'll go back to update and security, We'll go back to recovery. We'll go back to advanced startup. Start now. And it's going to bring up that menu again for how we want to choose what kind of restart we want. And instead of choosing to boot to another device, I want to go to troubleshoot and advanced options and go to the UEFI firmware settings. What that does is it's going to reboot the computer and then automatically go into the BIOS without me having to press any buttons. So that ends that frustration. It's a really nice feature of Windows 10 that functions with a UEFI BIOS. So in just a second, we'll have that screen up. We're going to load the setup defaults, the optimized defaults, save and exit, go back into Windows. We're going to run Crystal Disk Mark one more time. Now, if there's no improvement, then we'll move it into the other M.2 slot. See what that is. See what those results are, if we need to, but this may be all we have to do. So back over to exit, load optimized defaults, OK. Save changes and reset. Click OK. Not sure what the whole overclock thing was. I didn't overclock this, so it must have been in the BIOS at some point. I didn't change it, but it'll be forever a mystery. Okay, there is Freddy's Revenge all booted up. A double click and a double click. And yes. And here we go again. So being a computer technician, there is a lot of repetition, especially when we're diagnosing and we're repairing. We have to verify our repair is sticking, right? Or that, well, the changes we've made have had the impact. Again, assumptions aren't going to fly you very far in this industry. You're going to look ineffective and inept compared to somebody else who checks everything. So if you can't do what everybody else is doing in your field, it's going to make you look like you're not doing a good job. Now, again, nothing's changed on our read speed. We'll see where we are on the writes. No idea. Could be anything. It has not made any improvement. We've always been right around 2800. It's a little better, 3200, but still not. So it's half of what it should be, really. It should be twice that. So whatever's going on is still going on. So easy enough to switch to the other M.2. We'll power down and we'll go full screen on camera 2 here. And oh good, I left the screwdriver over here. And my glasses. Wasn't expecting this to take this long. Story of my life. Gotta pop the video card out because it's in the way, and you'll see I cut power to the power supply. Really should unplug it. Again, it's all about safety. Especially when it's not your hardware, it's customer's hardware, you're responsible for it. So if you break it, you bought it. And unfortunately, the one you buy is going to the customer and the one you bought is the broken one. So it does kind of change how one goes about repairing computers when there is a consequence of liability. All right, let's take that and move it down here. The drive is a little warm, but it's not hot. All right. That one there. And I just want to put this screw back so I don't lose it. Like I said, the machine doesn't care which M.2 slot you want to put your M2 drive in. I like to go sequentially. It's just my OCD, but it's not a requirement. Put the video card back in. Okay. Plug that in. Plug that in. Turn that on. Move that out of the way. And we'll fire it up again. And around the wheel goes. If you don't laugh, you'd cry. Stuff that is easy. Stuff that should be easy, rather, can sometimes lead to some of the most frustrating problems versus getting into something complicated you expect to have a frustrating problem, right? So again, just moving the M.2 slot or moving the NVMe drive into a different M.2 makes no difference to the computer. It's still going to boot the same. Everything's still the same as far as Windows is concerned. There's no adjustments, nothing to deal with activation or anything like that. Winston Liu has contributed $5 Canadian via Super Chat. He says, it is cool today, Carrie. Right on. Well, it's not cool here. It's really hot. Let's take a look here. I have to go full screen on my side of things so I can see what you guys are seeing full screen. And back over to the Crystal Diskmark software and back over to Diskmark 64 and once more to sequential. We're really consistent there, and in theory it should be the same numbers regardless of which M.2 slot we're using. So far this is performing as I assumed it would, and I expect our writes to be the same. Whatever's causing those writes to be at around 2800 is likely still going to affect us, but I would be happy to be wrong, but I won't be able to tell you why. But if I'm right, I can tell you why, because then it's because it makes sense. Here we go. Yeah, sounds still not right. It's still basically half speed. So something funky's happening there. Out of curiosity, now I have to know. It's just not. That is underperforming. This is what? This is an Asus, no, wrong keyboard. Asus TRX 40 Strix gaming. I think it's the Strix TRX 40-E. BIOSes. There's a BIOS of what, 1603? We have. I still got to revisit that whole firmware thing. I allow myself to get sidetracked too much. Now I'm fixated on the BIOS, so let's deal with this. Let's grab CPU-Z. Paste it. Double clicky. 64-bit. I'm not even sure I selected the right motherboard. So CPU ID, that's going to help me to identify the exact make of the motherboard here. Yeah, RX40 1303. Does that say TRX40 XE? It does say TRX40 XE. So I may not have the right BIOS on the website here. We want to do TRX40 dash. XE. There we go. That's the board. Now we go over to the support side, over to the drivers, whenever the page loads, which I'm sure will be any minute now. Drivers and utilities, BIOS and firmware, 1603. Well, maybe it is the same BIOS. So we're going to download that BIOS, and we will extract it and grab my BIOS flash drive. We'll take this flash drive out because we're done with that. We'll plug this flash drive in the back. Anywhere is fine. We don't need to rename an ASUS BIOS unless we're doing the BIOS flashback. So I've seen some YouTube channels show how to do that, to rename it, when it was absolutely unnecessary for them to do so. So they're not technicians, they're just enthusiasts making videos. Not that there's any harm in it, but you should know why you're doing things. Now, I have two BIOSes on here for something. I guess I don't need these BIOSes. I guess I'll delete them. I don't know what they're for anymore. That way I don't accidentally pick the wrong BIOS. Close that out and close this out, and then we'll go to the firmware settings again. So again, I go to Update and Security, and then I'm going to go to Recovery, Restart Now. Then I'm going to click Troubleshoot. Then I'm going to click Advanced Options. Then I'm going to click Firmware Settings, and then I'm going to hit Restart. It's a lot of clicks, but it gets us into the BIOS without having to press the key at the right time. It's just going to restart, take us right into that BIOS. Once we're in the BIOS, then we can choose the BIOS Update or BIOS Flash option, which is usually in the Tools section of most manufacturers' BIOSes. So I'm not touching anything. It should take us right into the BIOS. Any minute now. Okay, so we go over to where it says Tool up there on the top. There's the ASUS Easy Flash 3 utility. Press Enter. It sees the flash drive with the BIOS file by default. Give it a double click. You want to read the file. So it's going to read the file for two purposes. One, it wants to verify the file's not corrupt. Second, it wants to verify the file is compatible with your motherboard. So it says, do you really want to update? Now, it wouldn't ask this if the BIOS wasn't compatible. So version 1603, yes. Now down at the bottom it says processing. We're going to leave hands off on this and let it take as much time as it needs to do whatever it needs to do without us touching anything. Just leave it alone. Selden Bell says Tom's Hardware claims the 4 terabyte Fire CUDA has a sequential write speed of 6,000. Yeah, that sounds about right. Appreciate that. Can you see what drive you are writing to? The tool, the Crystal Disk Mark, has the drive letter right there on the screen, right on the utility. There's only one drive, so I don't really have a choice. It's not like there's any other drive I could be testing. But if you have multiple drives, you'll just use the drop-down box in the crystal disk mark. If you rewind the video, you'll see it shows the C drive. Darren Kluth has just joined us. Welcome in there, Darren. Now, these motherboards that are used on these real high-end processors, they have a fairly large BIOS. So the size of the BIOS itself is typically larger than a typical consumer board. They're going to take a bit longer to flash. So regardless if we're going to take 30 seconds or 30 minutes, I don't care. The rule is hands off, leave it alone. It'll automatically restart when it's done. So hopefully we'll get the result we're looking for with the BIOS update. Once the BIOS is updated, I do want to load the optimized defaults, save and exit, and then we'll rerun Crystal Disk Mark one more time. If you're just joining us, DVR mode is turned on, and feel free to rewind and see what you've missed. I'm going to grab a cold Gatorade here because this one's gotten lukewarm on me. We are finally in September seeing the light at the end of the tunnel of these 100-degree days. I think we've got another week or two of 100-degree days. But, you know, it won't matter to me after next week because I'll be in Michigan anyway. So those 100-degree days for me are going to be over next week regardless, at least for a few weeks. Updated successfully, system will be reset. No, again, I haven't touched anything. I did not click OK. The system reset regardless. So that's why I tell you, you don't, and I strongly recommend you don't touch anything. Just leave it all hands off. And then it should go ahead and bring us back into Windows again. So the first boot after the BIOS updates may take longer than normal. That is normal. And even on lower end motherboards, that's normal. I'm not taking that flash drive out because sometimes after the first boot, it's on some boards, it'll still continue flashing the BIOS. I can never keep straight which boards do that and which don't, or which manufacturers do that or are prone to doing that. There's no benefit to me removing it right now. So patience is key and just let the system sit. I know it looks a little worrisome. We've had a blank screen now for an unusually long period of time, but I want to remind you that after updating a BIOS, when BIOS updates fail, it's usually because the end user, well, we're not going to say usually, but quite commonly because the end user got impatient and started pushing keys and turning the thing off before it was complete, and then they created a problem when there wasn't one. As you can see, it has tried to boot, but now the BIOS has been updated and reset. So we need to go into the BIOS. BIOS is updating. Do not shut it down. So see, the flash drive is, speak of the devil, right? The flash drive light was on and it was continuing to update the BIOS. Sometimes on these boards, there's certain areas of the BIOS that cannot update well in the BIOS, which is why it has to restart. And that's exactly why I say keep your hands off of it. And I was assuming that we had a message there and I was pushing enter, I think I was pushing, which didn't interfere with anything. But I should have read it a little more carefully regardless. So we're going to hit F1 now to run setup. That's going to take us into the BIOS, which should reflect version 1603 once we get in there. And yeah, I see 1603 right there at the top. And I'm going to turn off the camera for a second so you can see the whole BIOS screen. And then I'm going to go over to exit, load optimize defaults, enter, OK, save changes and reset. OK. So now we'll reboot and run Crystal Disk Mark upon reboot and see if that has resolved our problem. Now, if that resolves it, that is logical, that makes sense, and I'm good with that answer. If it doesn't resolve it, we could have a driver-related issue. It may be the drive. I may have a funky drive. I don't have another one of these to swap out. I do have a Western Digital SN850X, which is just, it's $50 cheaper, but almost nearly the same in performance. And that's brand new in the box. I was going to compare them side by side. Turns out I might be doing that tonight. It wasn't my plan, but hey, I mean, I'm in this far, in for a penny, in for a pound, right? So let's see what happens. Are you feeling lucky? All right. Any minute now. There we go. Crystal Disk Mark with no other changes being made. Let me go ahead and pull the flash drive. We don't need that anymore. Crystal Disk Mark 64. Yes. Let's do the sequential reads. Okay, I'm expecting the same read, but I'm hoping for write speeds closer to 6,000. So the read speeds are pretty much unchanged. They're ideal. They look good. And it's going to wait 5 seconds. There's the write test. And the write test has started. No, it has made no difference at all. Fascinating. Oh, no, wait a minute. Wait a minute. 4125, that's not too shabby. Still 2/3 of what it should be, though. Let the test complete. It's a little better, but it's definitely not where it should be. One more time, I want to take a quick look over at the properties of the C drive here. Because if the write buffer has been disabled, that would certainly explain it. Yeah, it looks fine. Okay, pretty interesting. Pretty interesting. Let's do it one more time. We're going to get the same. And if you notice up here, it shows us what drive we're testing. Isn't that interesting that we run the same test again and the numbers are completely different? So that inconsistency is a little troubling, but I want to see where this is going. So there's our 5-second delay. Then we get into our write speed. Nope. So it's also a good idea to use more than one testing. So, when you're diagnosing something like this, like the ATTO benchmark may be a good second opinion just to validate it's not a utility compatibility issue. So before I do anything else, let's get a second opinion. mean, it certainly seemed like it installed quickly. See what this has to say. This may not be the latest version either, now that I think about it. So it's going to write files of various sizes and give us write and read speeds. And you'll notice that as the file sizes get larger, the write and read speeds will go up until it hits a certain point where it sort of peaks and it kind of will decline a little bit. So these smaller files, obviously they don't write as fast because there's not as much to write. But you should see the numbers sequentially keep growing. And again, you can download the ATTO benchmark and run it on your system and see a similar pattern that as the file sizes get bigger, the transfer rate goes up until it gets to a certain size, like a gig or larger, I think. We're still in the megs here. Or sorry, we're still in the Ks. We're only moving 16K. One of the reasons I don't run this test is it just takes forever. And I'm not real interested in how it's moving the smaller files. I just want to see where it's, you know, in a best case scenario, what's the drive going to do? Of all things being ideal, you know, the best circumstances for the best drive performance, what's the best the drive can do? And so looking at these smaller numbers might be more of an interest to somebody working in databases or things, but for me, I'm like, come on, let's just get to the good stuff here. And I don't like to change the settings. I always run it on defaults. I know I could go in there and manipulate the settings to go do exactly what size file I want it to do, but it may not always be the same size file that's beneficial to each drive, but it's going to be larger than these little files that it's doing. We got to get 3/4 of the way down at least, if not 8/10 of the way, before we start seeing the bigger numbers. Now they're displaying the write speeds first and then the read speeds second, opposite of what we're seeing on Crystal DiskSmart. And we want to see numbers in this, on the right side, we want to see numbers up around 6 gigabytes per second. And the 7250, the 7200 on the reads. So as these file sizes are getting bigger, well, now file size got the write speed suffering now. Read speeds have been pretty consistently up there. There seems to be an inconsistency though. Sometimes those read speeds are dropping dramatically for no apparent reason. But you'll see none of the write speeds are more than 3.3 gigabytes per second, which wasn't much more than what Crystal DiskSmart was reporting anyway. So we're consistent. At least the results we're getting, well, it's not operating where it should be, and it just seemed to be dropping out periodically. So what I want to do next, we're going to take the flash drive out of here, put that away. Let's go ahead and shut this back down. And we'll go full screen back over on the camera here. And now in the other room, I have that Western Digital SN850. And I still haven't revisited that whole firmware thing on the drive. You know, was the firmware I downloaded the same version I already had? Because the website told me that drive originally came with an older firmware. So I still need to follow that little investigation up. So this is Western Digital's competing product to that Seagate. And this is the focus. Come on now. No? Anything? Anyone? This is just painful. There it goes. Now the Western Digital says it'll do up to 7,300. You know, look, once you're in the upper sixes or the lower sevens, it's such a minor little difference. You'd have to be transferring something massively and on a regular basis to notice that as a human being. Okay, so let's get the drive out of there. So here's the drive. Let's do a little close-up shot of this drive here. So again, my first experience with one of these, and these are pricey little devils. Still have focusing issues though, don't I? So that's where this other camera comes in handy. Turn the other camera on. Yeah, that's probably going to chop my head off, but that's all right. I just want to fire it up real quick and we'll switch over to this other camera just for a moment. There it is. Oh, that didn't chop my head off too badly. But at least when I hold the product up to this camera, it should zoom right in on it. Ah, what a difference, huh? That's what it's supposed to do. That's the back side. Okay, and then we can probably just zoom this out a little bit. And put that switch to off. Pop this video card out. It's like I got a Ford and a Chevy. Western Digital's in 1M.2, 4 terabyte SN850X, and our Seagate FireCuda 530 down on the bottom. We'll pop that graphics card back in there. I wasn't expecting this to take this long. I thought I was just gonna pop that Seagate in, run a Cronus, just like I did. You saw how fast everything was. And then I was expecting our reads and writes to be, you know, 6,000 and 7,000. And that has led us down a rabbit hole here. But I do want to make sure that when the customer, you know, look, they're gonna drop like $5,000 on this thing, so they better get $5,000 worth of computer. I got a reputation to keep. All right, now let's bring this down. Like so. Joe wants to know why Crystal Diskmark is only showing 1 gig at the top. That's the size of the test file. Or the total size. You can read more about how Crystal Diskmark works and what those settings are for. I leave everything at defaults, and I would recommend you do the same if you want to compare your results. You have to run the same configuration of tests. If you change the parameters of the test, your results then are not usable to compare against mine. You have to have the same test settings. So let's see, I don't want that. I want to go to full screen on HDMI. There we go. And then I'm going to right click on the start button and go to disk management so we can partition and format that new Western Digital drive. So just click OK. That's our new Western Digital right there. I'm not going to clone the operating system to it if I'm going to see the same read and write speeds. So we're just going to do a basic partition and format. Now, if this shows better read and write speeds, then it'll be worth cloning over and then run the same tests again with the Seagate removed. So with the Western Digital drive now formatted, I can bring up Crystal Disk Mark. And again, we want the 64-bit version. Now in this case, we will change from the C drive to the D drive, of which 0% is being used. And you know what? Let's just do all the tests. I've never ever used one of these Western Digital SN850s. Like I said, it's about $50 less than the Seagate drive and only slightly slower. In this case, it's actually slightly faster, because the Seagate drive does say 7200 on the box and the Western Digital says 7300 on the box. So what I've read in the magazine isn't aligning precisely, but the magazine isn't just considering sequential like I am. So apparently the Seagate is faster with the larger amounts of smaller files. So it depends how you use your computer, right? Whether or not you're going to see a difference. But we're off to the races with that number. That's a good number. I could have a defective Seagate drive too. It might be something I have to RMA. Or it could be some weird incompatibility. I mean, I won't know until I take the Seagate drive out and put it into a completely different system to see how it performs. It may just be these parameters. It shouldn't be. But again, it's really bad form as a technician to make assumptions. People are paying you to work, not to assume, and they're paying you for results. So if you're assuming things that you're like, well, it couldn't be this, so you're spending 3 times longer than somebody else who didn't assume it couldn't be this, and they actually checked it and they were done and fixed the problem, or you're still chasing your tail. The only way you know for sure is to test it. And until you get the test results, anything's possible. And when the test results come back and they're not what you're expecting, then you can decide if you want to investigate why that is, right? Because you're going to be shocked. You're going to say, there's no way that should have happened. And on the one hand, you'll be delighted that you found something, but on the other hand, you shouldn't have. So it's kind of a mixed blessing. All right, let's see what our write speeds are going to be this time around as it clears out and pauses for 5 seconds. And it will begin the write speed now. So here comes write test number 1. Ah, so much better, way better. Interesting, very interesting. This is what we're expecting. So now you notice when we ran the test twice on the Seagate, we got very drastically different numbers, and that shouldn't be happening. You're never going to get the exact numbers twice, but you should still be in that same ballpark, plus or minus, let's say 100 megabytes, okay? So we're 7365 megabytes per second read and 6600 megabytes per second written. That is impressive. I was led to believe that the FireCuda was better, but it appears the Western Digital, at least under this configuration and with my first time experience with unboxing both of these drives, the Western Digital seems to be cleaning this one's clock. They also said the Western Digital was $50 cheaper, but I'm not finding that to be true. Although the Western Digital drive has been on sale for, I think Best Buy has it for $500, and the Seagate is $550. But the Western Digital drive retail, the manufacturer's suggested retail, I think is $800, which is a lot of money for 4 terabytes, but you're paying for that performance. Now, if you had $800 to spend, would you rather have one slower 8 terabyte drive or one fast 4 terabyte drive? For me, I will take capacity over performance any day of the week. Speaking of capacity, you're going to start seeing a jump in capacity on these NVMe drives. Give it a year, 4 terabytes is going to be nothing. Okay, so those are more or less our final numbers on the Western Digital. What I want to do once this test completes is I want to run just the sequential test. I want to repeat just the sequential on the Western Digital to see if the numbers jump around like they did on the Seagate drive where the numbers got cut in half. Because I'm thinking something's up with that Seagate drive. I don't believe it's operating the way it's supposed to be. Now, for full disclosure, I bought that Seagate drive off of eBay because it was the cheapest place I could find it. And the seller had like 10,000 feedback, all positive. But I'm always leery. The seller also shipped it with a signature required for delivery, which stinks because, you know, it's like my UPS guy knows when I'm in the bathroom. But in any case, I was able to catch the UPS guy this time. But it's all factory sealed and everything, so no idea what's up with that. But read speeds have been consistent. Let's see if our write speeds have dropped significantly now, see? But maybe they'll jump up here within this remaining tests. 4 of 5, and then 5 of 5. So that dropped dramatically, didn't it? And so once again, if we run the test again, we can once again see. The thing is, it should be fairly consistent. I shouldn't see a drop of 2,000 megabytes. That's concerning to me. Something's not right. Now, I don't know if there's a newer version of Crystal Disk Mark. That read speed dropped dramatically. We're still testing Drive D, but that's horrible. Now it's recovering. It's a little better. Again, that's why we're doing 5 of them, just to make sure we're getting an average here. But that still dropped, what, 1,400? But it's temporary, and I'm not sure what's causing that. And now let's see what the write speeds do. Sticking around 4,000. Fascinating. So what's happening is, once you've run the test, it's filling buffers and caches, and so your test results the second and third time are different. You sort of have to do a complete restart and clear the memory out to get an accurate test result the first time. Now, with a mechanical hard drive, you would consistently see the same numbers within a few megabytes. On these solid-state drives, it's a little different because of the caching techniques that are involved. I suspect that's the reason, but these numbers are far better than the Seagate. Now, if we drop that over to the C drive, over here, let's test drive C, and let's just do that sequential tests. So that's been consistent. 7250 has been consistent on the Seagate drive on the reads. What's been inconsistent are the writes. And that's disconcerting when you're dropping this kind of change on a drive. You know, especially when we're never seeing high writes. The most we've seen is about 4,000. We should be seeing 6,000. So what's it going to do? 1,500. Now it's thumbing its nose at me. Okay. All right. So I can investigate this. I can look more into it, or just make a recommendation to the customer. We go to the Western Digital and then move on because I have other things to do. I've got vacation coming up. This isn't the time to start another project. I don't want to send something off to RMA that's worth that kind of money and have it shipped back to me while I'm 2,300 miles away. So that's something I wouldn't deal with until I got back. It's a 5-year warranty. I got plenty of time. But it does seem like the Western Digital is outperforming. Is it possible the drive is heating up? Yeah, it's possible the drive is heating up. However, it seems unlikely that I mean, in all likelihood, heat is definitely a part of the equation here. These drives do start to get hot, and it doesn't take very long for them to get hot. However, because Crystal Disk Mark is doing the write test, I'm sorry, it's doing the read test first. I don't know that there's a way to start. I wish I could flip it the other way and see if the number's reversed. That is possible. But if that's the case, then the Western Digital is not getting as hot, which would make the Western Digital a more desirable drive anyway. You know, it's not explaining why the Western Digital write speeds are aligned with where they should be, and the Seagate write speeds are half of what they should be, and that's been consistent. So that's something to figure out, definitely food for thought. So let me go ahead and close this out. And I want to resolve this before I drop the 3090 Ti in it, because that card's going to be real difficult to get out once it clicks into place. So let me close this and let me shut this down. For now, I've sort of accomplished two things, which is testing this other camera. And this camera did overheat on me. It is hot in here today though, but it's good to know that this camera will overheat. And there may be some settings in the camera I can use so it's not working so hard. And then it could be heat related on the solid state drive, but I'm not convinced. More testing will be required. I would say, based on my experience today, if I had to recommend the FireCuda 530 versus the Western Digital SN850X, I would go with Western Digital on this round. Usually with Seagate and Western Digital, it's 6 of one, half dozen of another. They're generally the same performance for the same price, for the same capacity, for the same warranty, the same return process. They're almost indiscernibly identical. So it's unusual when something like this comes up. And I don't know if it's the drive itself or if it's the configuration of this particular hardware. I was going to look into the firmware on this too. I'll look more into that offline. I've been on longer than I thought I was going to be. We've been on now for almost 3 hours, so I thought this was going to be a 90-minute broadcast. Story of my life, right? What camera is overheating? It is a Sony ZV-1. The Sony ZV-1 seemed perfect for my needs. It's almost half the price of that RX100 that we're using on close-ups. It doesn't have as much of a zoom. It doesn't have a ring control on the lens. But the RX100 doesn't have the Mark 7 does not have a hot shoe. This camera does, but I don't think this camera has a built-in flash, where the RX100 Mark 7 does have a built-in flash. They're the same 1-inch sensor, and they're the same camera body. It's the same footprint, same battery, same menuing system. But the ZV-1 seemed more aligned for what I do. It's got a feature called Product Showcase, where when you hold the product in front of the camera, it'll snap its focus to what's in front of the lens, what's closest. Most cameras don't do that. They're always focused on people's faces, and this camera has that option too. But the Product Showcase feature is a pretty unique thing I've never seen on a camera before. And it's got another feature on it, which I thought would be ideal for us. which I can't remember what it is. But overheating is a concern with these. These are little pocket cameras. And you can see picture quality on this little pocket camera. You know, it's a $700, $600 camera, and the Panasonic camera, this is a $5,000 camera right here. So a lot of this, as you can tell if you've been watching the channel lately, picture quality has been very different, even from the same camera, as I'm learning how to configure them, because this $5,000 camera has settings that the little pocket camera doesn't have. But what the little pocket camera does better than these big cameras is that out of the box, just turning it on full auto and doing nothing but white balance, the colors are richer. So like with this, with the Sony, if I go back to the Sony, it's got a couple little features in it that I've never seen on a camera before that are more in tune to consumer use rather than professional use. And there's a part of me that likes the control of having, you know, having the option to control little tiny details. And then there's a part of me that's just not in the mood. All I want to do is turn the thing on and get to work. And so these little pocket cameras in general are better for just grab and go, run and gun as they call it. Whereas the bigger cameras are better for dialing everything in perfectly, right? You're never going to get it perfect when you just set everything to auto. It'll be good enough. But for some reason, Sony just does a better job with the color interpretation, just flat out of the box. But the colors on all these cameras can be set to be identical, if not superior. When and if the day comes when I sit down to learn, I didn't realize how much I was going to have to learn. I sort of was like, oh, this will be fun to learn. But I'm so busy with work, I don't have time to figure out what all these settings are. So I'm kind of fidgeting and experimenting, and I'm like, well, that's good enough. And I go live, and then I wait and see what your feedback is. And, you know, like, again, we're not going to please everybody, but overall the consensus will be a preference. This one had better whites or better darks or sharper colors or more vibrant. This one made everything yellow. This one made everything blue. And those are all just camera settings. So back at the Sony, there's a lot of adjustments I've made where I probably have made the picture worse, honestly, than if I'd have just left it alone. But I sort of ran out of time, and I was like, all right, close enough, and just thought I'd wait and get your feedback. But in the meantime, the Panasonic camera, which was the worst picture last week, it's almost like a better picture today. So I am dialing it in. It's getting better. So things like shutter speed, video gain, and color temperature, those three things are the major factor so far that I've realized are affecting the vibrancy and the vividness of the colors, not just the color balance, but the shutter speed. So the higher shutter speed is giving me a brighter picture, reducing the need for video gain. And because my video gain was compensating for a lower shutter, when I'm holding the products close to the Panasonic now, because the gain is so high, that's why it was all whitewashed. So I still have more fine tuning to do on this Panasonic, but I'm getting there. So in any event, having the little Sony ZV-1 is very promising, that some little tiny camera like that, which, by the way, it looks silly sitting on this giant tripod, but I mean, we're just making YouTube videos here with these cameras for now, and it doesn't take a whole lot. But anything that we can go, you know, straight out of the box without having adjustments is a nice option, and it having something where I can fine-tune every little detail is also a nice option. It just depends on what I got going on for the day, and when work slows down and I can really, really get to know these cameras better, I can much better dial them in, especially when I have a permanent studio. You know, Studio B here is temporary, and I don't know how much longer I'll have it. So when I'm in Michigan, I will be looking for a house out there, and fingers crossed I'll find one while I'm out there. I don't know what the odds of that are, but I'm hopeful that there'll just be the magic house that'll be just happen to be available for sale and be the right price at the right place, have that broadband I need, and I can then, you know, once the house is purchased, start moving studio equipment into it, and then that'll be a permanent studio with fixed lighting and fixed cameras, and everything can get dialed in and it'll never need to change. So I'm looking forward to that day, but that day may be, you know, a year or more away. I hope not. I hope that it happens before. Look, if it gets to be snowing in Michigan, it's not the best time to move. So if it doesn't happen before snowfall, I might have to wait till the fall, till the spring, but we'll see what happens. You know, with the right house at the right price, I'm not going to let the weather get in the way. Patrick says, just get a few red cameras. Yeah, we'll just drop 30, 40 grand on some Blackmagic cameras. So anyway, so the Panasonic versus the, sorry, this is the Sony. This is the Panasonic. This is the Sony. This is the Panasonic. Which, just by opinion in the chat, which do you prefer? This is the Panasonic. This is the Sony. Panasonic, Sony. Remember, I probably crippled the Sony with some of the changes. I should put the Sony in auto mode just to see what it does, and then we'll wrap things up today. Hey, there's our friend Peter Laycock joining us. Peter contributes 50 pounds. He says, good morning, Kerry and everyone in the chat. All the best from Bonnie, Scotland, where the temperature in Edinburgh is at 51 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 11 degrees Celsius. The time is 4:52 a.m. Whew, that's too early for me, Peter. Good to see you, my friend. I hope you're doing well. Let me just go over here to the Sony camera and put it back on auto. Let's see. How do I do that? We're on manual. How do I get it on menu? Let's go back. Should be a full auto option here. Mode, is it the mode button? Function. ISO, let's put ISO to auto. Ooh, wow. As I drop the ISO, you see how the picture's dropping. Okay, there's auto ISO being set right there, and it looks awfully dark. And it's giving us 1/250th shutter speed, which is higher than the Panasonic. I think we're at 1/150th. It still shows manual. Let's go back to function. Exposure compensation is +2. Let's bring exposure back to flat 0. And what else did I change? Focus area, focus mode. Oh, color. Let's put the white balance on auto. And let's put the creative style, it's in vivid. Let's drop it to standard. Okay, so that's f2.8. ISO of 2500 with flat exposure, no exposure compensation, and shutter speed is 1/250th. So why is my shutter speed so high? Oh, exposure's in manual. Let me put the exposure in program to auto mode. There we go. Okay, now everything is in auto. Let me just back this off a little bit. Flip this back out the other way. Okay, so this is everything on auto on the Sony. So that's flat out of the box, rocking and rolling. Okay, so that's me trying to make it better. I probably made it worse. So that's everything flat. Now let's compare it to the Panasonic. Now the Panasonic, that's me with all the adjustments. The Panasonic flat was what you saw last week, which you guys didn't like. Quite frankly, I didn't care for it either. Sony, Panasonic. Sony, Panasonic. Now, the Panasonic, if I align all the ISO, shutter, and white balance to what is being auto set on the Sony, I should get a similar brightness and picture quality. The skin color on a Panasonic's too yellow. That usually indicates my white balance is off, which again would be normal for me. I'm still playing around with the white balance. So Sony, Panasonic. So on the Sony, I'm sorry, on the Panasonic, which is what we're on now, I think the picture looks warmer. So you might say it's a bit too yellow. I might say, yeah, I kind of like it a little more yellow. It's not as cold, but fine adjustments on the color temperature could easily change that. I think I am setting them around 3,500 Kelvin when I'm setting them manually. It is splitting hairs. They're both very good pictures, I think. The Panasonic will never overheat. This Sony is overheated on me twice during this broadcast, so it might be because of the shutter speed and such that I had manually set. It's causing the camera to work harder, and then it overheats. But if anything, the Panasonic might be a little too bright. I'm looking at them side by side. On the Panasonic, let me just try something here real quick. I think I've got my gain set too high. I'm on 15 dB a gain. I should be at 12 probably, and I knew that when I was playing with it. $14, $13, $12. And then as far as white balance goes, where are we at on the white balance? That makes it really yellow. That makes it too blue. And that's where I set it, which is not showing me my white balance. I always lose the white balance option on this Panasonic. It's in a weird place. How did I find it? Anyway, well, that's 12 dB a gain, which is probably better. So let's compare that. Sony, Panasonic. Sony, this is the Sony. This is the Panasonic. Bringing the gain down, the gain maybe hasn't worked to my benefit here. It almost looks dull. But then I can bring up the shutter speed. So again, it's just constant little variations in the settings, and they can make a pretty dramatic difference in the picture. Go back to the Panasonic for a minute. Well, I just don't know why I can't find the white balance on it. Like every time I go to find the white balance on this camera, if I put the Panasonic in full auto mode, so this is full auto right here, and that makes a pretty dramatic difference to the shutter and aperture than what I had. So that's full auto. Let me step around and see what that looks like. I just don't trust full auto. It tends to be one day it's good, one day it's not as good. So that's full auto out of the Panasonic, and then this is full auto out of the Sony. If anything, I think it looks too red. Well, the Sony almost looks a little faded by comparison. Ah, well, you know, look, this gives you an idea of what I'm playing with. I'm fascinated by it. I'm looking forward to the education. It's good enough for what we're doing, but I'm looking to make improvements as we move forward. But it seems like shutter speed, the gain, and the white balance are my three key concerns. The ISO and aperture, they're kind of related. Whatever one does, the other one sort of compensates the other way. So if we adjust one, then the other one automatically adjusts by itself. So I'm kind of steering away from those settings unless I'm looking for like a blurry background or something. I'm letting the camera, for the most part, decide that. But I don't know. Like if all I saw was this image and had nothing to compare it with, I think it looks great. And by the same token, if all I had was this video image to look at, it does, I do look a little red, but honestly, I feel really hot, so I might actually be red. But the colors look fairly true. Yellow lightning bolts. If anything, they're more yellow on camera. Colors are a bit more vivid on this camera than they are in real life. Maybe that's what's throwing me. It's my skin color is a little more vivid, I suppose. And again, all adjustable in the camera. It's just the way I have it configured. So it's not like one camera is better than the other. It's just one camera is configured a little better than the other. So with the Sony on full auto, apparently it's made it a little yellow. That's what it looks like anyway. But it's not bad. And especially when you consider the Panasonic's 100 times bigger, well, at least 20 times larger than this Sony. And about 10 times more expensive than the Sony. So either way, I just wanted to try the ZV-1 to see how it was going to pan out. I wanted to try it before leaving, and I'm happy with it. It's great. I just got to, if my biggest concern is it powering off. As long as I've got a fallback camera, it's not a big deal, but preferably it will stay on for as long as I need it. But these little point and shoot or compact cameras, when you're doing video, especially if you're recording to the memory card, you're probably only getting about 10 minutes. If you're outside, it's just going to overheat. You really need a full-size camcorder. But during a live stream and all we're doing is passing the video through, I would hope it didn't overheat. But again, could be just an adjustment I have to make. Sony's got a yellow tint to it. You know what's probably causing that are the lights. That would be my guess. But again, I've got it on full auto, and at the very least, I should be setting a white balance. So if we did a white balance on the Sony and left everything else alone, it should be pretty good. Where do I find my white balance? So we'll take it off auto white balance, and we'll put it on 3400 Kelvin. I think I just did that. Yeah, so we're at 3400K, 3400 Kelvin. And that should clear up that yellow. Let's see. Yeah, it took care of the yellow. Panasonic, now I look even more red. Sony, yeah, the Sony, you know, just setting the white balance and leaving everything else alone, it's not bad. And then again, on the Sony, there's one other setting, which is the in the creative mode. Just out of curiosity, I'm curious what you guys think. I had it on vivid on my creative style. So that's the vivid mode. So then there's two changes, the white balance at 3400K and the creative style in vivid. And now when we compare it to the Panasonic, because the Panasonic's basically tuned, I like the colors to be more vivid. So even though there's not necessarily a setting in the Panasonic that says vivid, I think you'll find the two cameras are more closely aligned now. If anything, the Sony, this is the Sony, Still doesn't quite seem as rich as that Panasonic. I don't know what I did to the Panasonic, but I've adjusted something really well. But I gotta say, I'm not displeased with the Sony. And especially for the money and its size, it's incredible it can do what it's doing. So anyway, fun stuff. Thanks again for your feedback. I appreciate it. Let me know which one you prefer in the comments after the video, and we'll see what the consensus is just based on how they're set right now. I'm still going to keep playing with them, but I'm just kind of curious if the majority of us, if the majority of you think similar to me on which image is preferable. The Greek has just sent $25 Amazon gift card to me. He says, this is for a few Gatorades for your trip. Be sure to send us a message when you get to Michigan. Safe. Right on. I'll be making a video when I'm there. And then $5 also. This is an Amazon gift card from Yin Hua Seng. Well, thank you so much for the support, guys. Thank you for all the contributions. Peter Laycock, as well as earlier during the broadcast, contributions have come in from Rob Gurley, Winston Liu, as well as Mark Gaines, Planet Cryos, with all those contributions. Michael Dane, of course. Nicholas Menard in Canada, as well as Craig Casabona and Patrick. Patrick Manny and Mark Baggett and Mark Gaines became supporting members here, as did Planet Cryos. Alan Lindas, thank you as always. And Mira Ora also became a member here. As a member, there are benefits such as members only videos, which I know I keep talking about, I haven't done yet because things have been so busy, but they're coming. And then there'll be members exclusive giveaways. So there are benefits to membership. And I realize as I go on vacation, as we move into the end of September, beginning of October, the video content is going to be less than normal because I'll be on vacation. But I will update you and share with you the beauty of Michigan. Try to make at least one short video a week. And I am spending a week driving, so it's about 3 to 4 days to get there and 3 days back, depending on where we stop along the way. We tend to kind of mosey to get there, but when it's time to come home, we're generally wanting to get home, you know. So we might take an extra day. We want to check out this place called Meow Wolf in Santa Fe, New Mexico, which takes us a little off the route, but I'm really excited to check it out. I know they have 3 locations. There's one in Denver, one in Vegas, and this one in Santa Fe. This is all funded by George R.R. Martin, interestingly enough, but it looks like a real fun experience. And you know, I've been to Burning Man a couple of times. I really love interactive art exhibits. And this looks like that, only a much smaller scale, but still huge for what it is. So you can search here on YouTube for Meow Wolf and see some video walkthroughs of it. You might think it's just really bizarre and weird. The weirder and more bizarre, the more interested I am. So if it doesn't make any sense to you, at least that much should. If he likes weird and bizarre, I get it. I mean, I don't get it, but I get it. All right, guys. Well, thanks for hanging out with me. I'll continue working on this and see if I can't isolate what's happening here. The quick solution is I'm going to make a recommendation for the customer to go to the Western Digital, and that just solves that issue. And as for the Seagate, my plan will be to just put it away and revisit it when I get back from vacation. And it may not even be an issue in a different motherboard, or if it's a problem with the drive, like I said, it's got a 5-year warranty. I'm in no hurry. It's fine. So once I have that decision made, I can put that 3090 Ti in it. And yeah, then the customer can pick it up. This is being sold locally. I didn't want to ship this. It's far too expensive and far too fragile. But it's going to go to a good home, and it'll give me an excuse to build another Threadripper in the future. Thanks for watching. I will see you all again very, very soon. Until then, bye for now.